haunted dolls.
Oh my god.
It's an old clown doll. The name of the clown is called Clyde the Clown, and it was gifted to this guy, right? And instead of throwing it out, he just kind of, decided to take it home with him, knowing that creepy shit would happen involving this doll. It would move. You would find it in a different spot. He decided to record the doll.
And he catches it move?
Yes.
Let's see this shit. Footage looks even creepier when sped up to 3 times normal speed. What the f***? He's literally looking at the camera like, I see you, mother. I don't think that could be fake though, cause
why?
It moves mad slow. Also because it didn't do the cheesy move when like it moves like a hand.
And the fact that it's a clown, bro, and it looks like life size. That's one thing that I hate about like.
Oh, it's a big doll. It's not a little doll.
Bro, it's the size of the chair.
This eerie photo was taken right before that doomed plane took off from Wichita, Kansas the other day. And as you know, everybody pictured in this photograph died. So this is Donna Livingston and her husband Peter. And before the plane took off, she also captured a photo of the couple's 2 daughters, 14-year-old Everly and 11-year-old Lydia. Their figure skating coach can be seen right behind them as well. I feel like photographs like this really humanize tragedy because we can all see ourselves taking a photo like this. This looks like a completely normal flight. It really seems like these people should have landed, should have gotten off of the plane and carried on with their lives. But instead, unfortunately now, everybody in these photographs has perished. There was also this eerie Instagram story uploaded by Spencer Lane before the plane took off, which still remained on his Instagram for a full day after it was uploaded. An absolutely chilling reminder of the tragedy. Like I said before on my last post, these sorts of situations piss me off. Because none of these corporations and none of these people that are actually in positions of power will be held accountable for something like this. Yeah, they might have to pay a couple $1 million, pay a fine, act like they're fixing things and, making improvements to safety, but those things never actually happen. If you or I killed 65 people, we'd be in prison for life and we'd be handed the death sentence. But because this murder was carried out by corporations, nobody's really going to pay for it.
A woman was driving on a highway when she noticed headlights behind her. The car then drove up beside her and suddenly went behind her again. The woman began getting nervous. The car then drove up bumper to bumper and began flashing its high beams. The car followed her very closely and kept turning its high beams on and off. The woman kept focusing on the car, and when her exit came, she got off, and so did the car behind her, still flashing its high beams on and off. The woman then called 911 and told them a car was following her and flashing its high beams at her. The woman gave them her address, and as she approached her house, she saw red and blue lights. But as she pulled into her driveway, so did the other car, still flashing its high beams on and off like a maniac. 2 police officers then got out of their car and pulled the man from the vehicle that was following her. They then handcuffed him, but he began screaming, "Someone is in your car." The police then suddenly pointed their guns in the woman's direction and fired, and when she turned around, she saw the bloody corpse of a murderer fall out of her back seat. There was a big butcher knife in his hand, and when police searched the car, they found duct tape, a blindfold, and handcuffs. The woman then realized the man in the strange car was trying to save her life. When the police released him, he explained as he pulled up behind her car, his light lit up her back seat, and he saw a man with a butcher knife rising up behind her. And as the man was about to stab her, he flashed his high beams and the man crouched back down. He said he flashed his high beams every time he saw the man raise the knife.
Approximately 1/3 of all human trafficking victims across the world are children. The vast majority are female. Final Vow movie is a harrowing look at an unspeakable reality. Sister Anne Marie is no ordinary nun. She dedicates her life to caring for orphaned children and finding them loving homes. But her mission takes a darker turn when her work brings her face to face with the ruthless underworld of human trafficking. With the shadowy past herself, she uncovers a sinister web of corruption that threatens to destroy everything she holds dear. As her 2 worlds collide, the innocent children she protects and the ghosts of her past she can't outrun, she's tested to the limit. This gripping thriller took me on a roller coaster of emotions right from the first scene. What really sets this film apart from the rest is that it incorporates AI to make your viewing experience truly immersive. If you're like me, constantly wanting to ask questions and find out more throughout a film, you can do just that. Chat with the AI versions of the characters while you watch, like I did, to take your movie night to the next level. The best part is that this film is available exclusively on finalvow.com, so you don't even have to leave your sofa.
Right now, Google Images in California are basically going viral because they have been seeing a lot of help signs and a lot of warning signs. LAPD, human trafficking.
Whoa, what the fuck?
Help. You search up a specific types of coordinates, this is what shows up.
Help, traffic, help. What does that say?
FBI, I think. Federal. Tráfico Humano.
What the fuck?
And it's crazy because it's right next to shipping containers, and people ended up interviewing locals in the area. Most of them are like homeless people, but nobody seems to want to really like give any answers as to exactly what's going on or why he's even making these signs. And even the Phase people, Phase Ron, Lacey, they went to see the area, but when they got there, a random ass truck with tinted windows pulled up on them and said, "You gotta get the fuck out of here."
No way.
Bro, these say words on them.
What do they say?
I don't know, but look, it's right out of sentence.
Did I say irate? Yo, the entrance is open. Money. I see KERS.
Is there any chance you'd like to do an interview for our documentary?
Uh-oh. You say come here? Yo. I ain't gonna lie, you got that, gang. Get out. Say get out. Say get out.
The fuck?
Yeah, bro, and a lot of
A 77-year-old man in Mexico received a terrifying demand from the cartel: abandon your home or die. But Alejo Garza Tamez wasn't just an ordinary man. He had built his ranch with his own hands, and no cartel was going to take it from him. So he doesn't call for help, he doesn't pack his bags. Instead, he carefully prepares for battle. Inside the house, Alejo methodically sets up his defense. He loads rifles, places shotguns at every window, and gathers ammunition. The old man moves with quiet determination, ready to fight for his land. At around 4 a.m., the sound of engines can be heard approaching. A convoy of cartel trucks stop outside the ranch. It was quiet until a gunshot filled the night. It was Alejo. He began to shoot and kill multiple cartel members. Gunfire then rained down at the house from the cartel. Alejo moved room to room using different weapons to make it seem like there were multiple shooters. The cartel scrambles for cover, confused and desperate. Minutes feel like hours, and the cartel were furious as many of their men were now dead. They then resorted to using grenades. They threw them at the house, but this didn't stop Alejo. He continued firing, taking down even more cartel members. After hearing the gunshots, authorities arrived and found only one man dead in the house, which was Alejo. But outside laid countless dead cartel members. Alejo Garza Tamez wasn't a soldier. He wasn't an outlaw. He was just a man who refused to kneel. His final stand became legend, a story of courage that Mexico would never forget.
He filmed children using the restroom and got off to it. This is 38-year-old Siu Sit. So this Sit guy worked at a high school in California, specifically the Beckman High School. And when he was working as a teacher, Siu hatched a plan. He decided that he was going to go into the bathrooms in the school, set up hidden cameras, and record all of the children as they used the restroom throughout the day. So that's exactly what he did. Starting in at least February of 2020, he went through those bathrooms and installed cameras. And from 2020 to 2023, he viewed and downloaded hundreds of photos and videos that he had captured with those hidden cameras, showing adults working at the school using the restroom, teenagers, and even children under the age of 12 years old. He was also the high school robotics team coach, and while the robotics team was traveling and competing in Texas, he even put a hidden camera in the bathroom of their hotel room and recorded his students in there. Now, eventually authorities discovered the cameras, got a search warrant, but what they found in the man's house was incredibly disturbing. On Siu's devices, they discovered dozens of images and videos depicting graphic CSAM. They also found a hard drive that he owned that contained 22 photographs and one video depicting hardcore CP, with several showing the abuse of a toddler. They also found another hard drive with 150 more images and 4 more videos showing CSAM. Now, he was eventually arrested, but he was only sentenced to 17 years in prison. That means that one day, this guy will be free to live his life amongst the general public. I have no empathy for people like this, and I believe that these charges should definitely land someone in prison for life at minimum. I mean, how more disturbed can you get filming hundreds of students and children and even fellow faculty members while they're the most vulnerable, using the restroom at school, and then downloading all of that stuff, saving it, revisiting it, creating a treasure box of some of the most disturbing images and videos one can imagine. And after all of this, after victimizing hundreds of individuals, he's only given 17 years in prison. I don't know about you, but this really pisses me off. If you want to join my fight to expose these people, consider checking out my other content where I expose these freaks and the networks that they belong to in depth. You can also listen to my show, The Conspiracy Files, on any podcast platform like Spotify or Apple Podcasts.
This horrific attack is every mum's worst nightmare. I actually cannot fathom how evil somebody must be to actually do this. It was a cold winter's morning on the 11th of December 2017. Suddenly, neighbours of Michelle Pearson were woken up at 5 a.m. by sirens blaring through Jackson Street in Walkden. Firefighters raced to Michelle's property to try and contain a blaze that raged inside of it. It was a race against the clock, as there were children inside. Onlookers might have presumed that this was a horrifying accident, but the truth of this case is absolutely sickening. Inside of the home was 37-year-old Michelle Pearson, and her children were also trapped. 8-year-old Brandon, 15-year-old Demi, 7-year-old Lacey, and 3-year-old Leah. Her 16-year-old son and his friend were actually staying in the property that night, but managed to escape out of a window and climb down some scaffolding. After an agonizing wait, the locals got some horrific news. The eldest 3 children in the house were deceased. The 3-year-old and mum Michelle were raced to hospital. However, just days later there was some more tragic news. The community was absolutely shaken to hear that little Leah had also died and her mum was in intensive care. Now, Michelle had been left with horrific injuries and had extensive medical treatment to try and save her life. She was placed in an induced coma and was so badly burned and physically impacted by the fire that it actually took until April the following year for her to understand that her children had died. In the end, she passed away in the August after an agonizing battle. Now, the horrifying deaths were a result of 3 people. These were Zach Boland, David Worrell, and Courtney Briley. In November 2017, a feud had begun between some members of Michelle's family and Zach and Courtney. It's believed that someone at some point caused some damage to some cars belonging to Courtney and Zach. Zach, in retaliation, went to Michelle's house while her children were inside and smashed the front windows in with a hammer. He then threatened to petrol B her house, and she told police. Zach then called her a grass, spray painted on her house, and set fire to her bin. On the fateful night, Zach and David drank and did substances. They then made their way to Michelle's house with 2 other men and an iron bar. They shouted for Michelle's male children to come outside to fight, which they obviously didn't. In anger, they broke a window, and Michelle again contacted police. Officers arrived and took a statement, but the danger was far from over. The men then armed themselves with a machete and an axe. Along with Courtney, they made homemade petrol B devices in a kitchen of a nearby address. Courtney waited in a car while the 2 men took the petrol Bs, smashed through the kitchen window of the victim's home, and then threw them inside of the property. I've actually never before heard of a fire like this, but it spread so quickly and the heat was so intense that it actually melted the fire alarms before they'd even managed to go off and alert the family. Zach and David were jailed for a combined 77 years, and Courtney pleaded guilty to manslaughter and got just 12 years in jail.
Nothing scares me more than when someone goes missing under mysterious circumstances, yet they're found deceased a short time later, but hundreds of miles away from where they went missing. How they seemingly go such a far distance in such a short amount of time with no explanation of how they got there. That's what happened recently to 24-year-old John Combs. He was on the job when he suddenly became really disoriented. He checked himself into a hospital in the middle of the night, texted his dad saying, quote, "I've lied about everything in my life. I have no idea what is real and what is not. I want to come home." End quote. And then he vanished, only to end up dead over 150 miles away. The circumstances leading up to his death and how he died are horrifying, and this needs more attention, so Let's talk about it. John Combs was a hardworking lineman from Rochelle, Illinois. He traveled to Savannah, Georgia in October of last year to help restore power to those affected by Hurricane Helene. Hurricane Helene was so ferocious that it knocked the power out for 1.5 million people. So before it hit, 20,000 linemen gathered in Georgia to help restore the power that was going to be knocked out. This included local linemen as well as linemen that were contracted from out of state, just like John. So John flew into Georgia the day before Helene struck so that he could immediately be of help as soon as the storm passed. But not long after arriving, a series of eerie and mysterious events would play out that would alter John's life forever. On October 1st, John was working to restore power on Wilmington Island when he suddenly started acting strange. A day later, he checked himself into Memorial Hospital in Savannah saying he was experiencing an altered mental status. According to his medical records, John said that he suddenly became really disoriented and confused, and both of his arms and legs were tingling. During his short time in the hospital, he was in contact with both his dad and brother who were back home in Illinois. His dad stated that John seemed super disoriented and wasn't really making any sense on the phone, saying that he could barely even speak. John told his dad that he didn't really understand why he was in the hospital, but he sounded really scared, and that's something that stood out as really odd to his dad. John never got scared, but something had him really spooked in the hospital. Then in the middle of the night, John sent his dad a text from the hospital saying, quote, "I've lied about everything in my life. I have no idea what is real and what is not. I want to come home." End quote. He then pulled out his IV, got dressed, and walked out of the hospital after telling the staff that he was going to work. But in reality, John wasn't actually going to work, and why he told them he was, no one knows. He'd actually booked a flight to go back home, and his plan was to be back home in Illinois by October 4th. So after leaving the hospital in the middle of the night, John rented a car, drove to Atlanta, and tried to board his flight. But this is where things take another strange turn. During the boarding process, John's behavior reportedly became more and more erratic. A witness at the airport said that John gave a really loud speech, and in his speech he said, quote, "My name is John Combs from Rochelle, Illinois. My whole life has been a lie. I'm no good at anything I do. I don't want to be a lineman anymore." End quote. Because of the speech and his behavior, he was kicked off the flight, and what happened after this, where he went, and how he got there has never been explained. Less than 24 hours later, John would be found dead on some railroad tracks over 150 miles away in Montgomery, Alabama. He had been hit by a train, but it would take another 4 days for him to officially be identified. Before he died, John sent his brother his location via text, which was by the KOA campground in Montgomery. After doing so, he texted his dad again saying he was in the woods, but after this, his phone went dark and they lost all contact with John. This is when his family went to Alabama to begin looking for him, and after a few days with no sign of John, they reported him missing to the Montgomery County Sheriff's Department on October 8th. And sadly, this is when they got the horrifying news that John was no longer alive. Authorities found John's body back on October 4th, just a day after the hospital and airport incident. A railroad employee had contacted authorities about a man who had been hit by a train about a mile away from the Montgomery Regional Airport. When police arrived, they found John's body under the train, but unfortunately, as I'm sure you can imagine, he wasn't able to be identified. Security footage in the area showed John walking onto the tracks before being struck and killed by the train. It wasn't until John was officially reported as a missing person that he was able to be identified on October 8th. This was after his dad recognized a tattoo he had and a belt buckle he had been wearing. Additionally, police were able to ping his phone to his last known location, which was at the train tracks between a factory and the stockyards. This was all confirmation that the body found at the tracks was indeed John Combs. Authorities then began piecing together a timeline of John's last moments before being hit by the train, and they combed through his bank records to see if they could find any sort of clue as to what he had been doing. Police found that after getting kicked out of the airport in Savannah, John somehow made it to Montgomery by noon on October 4th, which is the day he died. He was officially last seen alive on security footage at a CVS at noon that day. The footage shows him walking into CVS with his backpack on, where he proceeded to buy some water. He then walked out of the store, and a few minutes later he walked back in, this time without his backpack, and he proceeded to buy a few more things. What he bought the second time is still unknown. He then took an Uber to a Burger King, and then another Uber to the Sunrise Extended Stay Hotel in Montgomery. Records showed that he was dropped off at the hotel at 3:15 p.m. on October 4th. Police then found that just 20 minutes prior, he had booked a room at that hotel on his phone, and why exactly he did that is still a mystery. This was the last time he was ever seen alive, as just a few hours later, he would be struck and killed by the train. So now John had officially been found, but this really only brought more questions. And the biggest one was how he ended up in Montgomery, over 150 miles away, how he got there so soon, and why exactly in that specific location. None of what happened to John was adding up, and his family began to suspect that something sinister was done to him. So this is when they decided to reach out to his employer, Red Rover Electric. They asked if John had possibly been hurt on the job that caused him to become disoriented. Like maybe he was electrocuted somehow, or possibly experienced a head injury. His employer went on to tell his family that if something did happen to John, it happened when he was alone and not on the clock. This was pretty much confirmation that something horrible happened to John, and it wasn't by his own volition. And this is where things take yet another strange turn. An investigative journalist tried reaching out to the owner of the company to talk about John, but he hung up on her. But this journalist was able to get in touch with a foreman who was on the same project as John. He was able to provide a little bit more information about the day John started acting strange. This foreman said that on October 1st, the whole crew, including John, was in the area of the golf course on Wilmington Island when John suddenly started acting strange. This was all the information he could provide, so the journalist then made a Facebook post to the Wilmington Island community, asking if anyone heard anything about John Combs or possibly saw anything out of the ordinary involving a lineman in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene. But in the post, the journalist didn't say anything about being interested specifically in the area of the golf course on October 1st. She wanted to be really vague in hopes that someone would come forward with any possible information, and luckily someone did, but again, it really only brings more questions. After seeing the post, someone in the community reached out to the journalist and said that she saw something right next to the golf course on the same day that John would have been working in the area. That day, she was driving down Wilmington Island Road and just so happened to be looking at the power lines and how damaged they were due to the hurricane. She then saw a white man matching John's description working alone on a power line. He was up in his bucket and no one was around him. She then saw what she described as like a mini explosion, kind of like small fireworks coming from the same pole. She said it was severe enough that it sent sparks flying down onto her car, and there was a really loud noise. The only thing she could think at the time was that she hoped the worker was okay because no one else was around to help him if he was actually hurt. When she brought this back up to the foreman on the project, he told her that no one in the Red Rover Electric crew would have been working alone as it's against protocol. But just one day after this incident, John checked himself into the hospital, and the rest followed. What's odd is that his medical records show that he denied having any recent traumatic injury at the hospital. So that makes me wonder if it was really him at the explosion site, and if it was, did he have some sort of head injury that caused him to become disoriented and make him forget? Or was he possibly electrocuted? I feel like he would have mentioned that at the hospital, or at the very least they would have seen some sort of damage to his body. It's just so weird to me that he was totally fine and normal, and then suddenly, seemingly out of nowhere, he started acting strange. John's family says that he has no history of any mental illness and no history of drug use. He was fine in the months leading up to the Savannah trip, and he was really looking forward to getting to help people during a time of tremendous need. His family believes that something happened to him that day on the job, causing him to become disoriented, whether it was possibly being electrocuted or hitting his head or maybe even being drugged. His behavior leading up to his death was just so abnormal and really out of character for him. All he wanted to do was just go home, so the biggest question is, what stopped him from doing that? John was incredibly driven and motivated. He was able to go through his lineman apprenticeship while owning and running his own business, and he was just the type of person that would help anyone without question. He had so many things lined up in his life, and his family believes that he wouldn't wind up in Montgomery just to end his own life. But it's now been 3 months, and there are still so many unanswered questions in this case. What really happened to John that day is still a mystery, but his family is not giving up hope. This is the Facebook page run by John's family for more information, and you can follow it for updates on this case. If you have any information at all, please contact the Montgomery County Sheriff's Department at 334-832-4980.
This is one of the darkest acts caught on Instagram Live. It's about the influencer Mia Star,
The YouTuber?
I'm hoping you're familiar with this. She was at a award ceremony. She was getting ready backstage on Instagram Live, talking to her fans and stuff. When she gets a knock at the door, she opens it. It's somebody in the bunny costume.
Yo, I think I saw this video, bro.
The bunny costume ends up stabbing her to death.
Slices her neck, bro.
And it's still an ongoing case. They have 5 suspects right now. The manager, the boyfriend, the ex-best friend, the videographer, and then like a fan.
So it's an unsolved mystery.
But if you guys do want to find out who killed Mia, this is when you guys come in, because this is a board game by What Do You Meme?
It's Who Killed Mia by What Do You Meme?
And this is not your average board game. It comes with a bunch of different clues, and it also comes with a digital side of stuff.
For all the true crime lovers out there, this is definitely the game for you guys.
The game will be available on Amazon, at your local Walmart, Target, or you can just click the link in our bio.
Let's find out who killed Mia.
This death really reminds me of the horrific Murdoch boat case. 31-year-old Jerry McMeekin was living in Texas. She was a fun-loving woman who loved spending time with her family. She was a new mum and was out celebrating on the 4th of July this year on a boat. By all accounts, people were drinking and celebrating on the boat and just generally having fun. It's believed that the boat that she was on was being operated by her brother-in-law, Kyle McMeekin. The boats were on Lake Conroe at around 9 p.m. when tragedy struck. The boat Jerry was on collided with another boat that was being driven by Shane Aniboli, aged 44. Dispatchers got a panicked call to say that somebody had gone overboard and couldn't be located. Emergency services raced to the scene and, tragically, Jerry's body was discovered at 11:30 p.m. She was found near Scotts Ridge boat ramp. It was sadly too late to save her. Kyle and Shane have both been arrested and charged with boating while intoxicated.
This TikToker was killed while she was making a TikTok video. This is 15-year-old Yasmin Esmeralda. So Yasmin lived in Mexico. And various news reports after the crime stated that Yasmin was almost infatuated with the cartel. One day, Yasmin was with her younger brother at her grandmother's house, and the two decided to start looking around the home. But when they were rummaging through a closet, they discovered that her grandmother had a submachine gun. It was a massive Uzi submachine gun, to be specific. And I'd show you a photo of it. You can look it up online, but I'll get banned from TikTok. So Yasmin decided that she wanted to have her brother film her while she played around with this weapon. Obviously, this is a terrible idea that you should never do. And sadly, while Yasmin was playing with the gun and her younger brother was filming, the gun fired and it ended up taking Yasmin's life. It's still completely unknown as to why she wanted to play with the gun and why she wanted to make a TikTok video with it. But like I said, experts and people from the area have stated that locals are almost infatuated with the cartels there. And it's possible that Yasmin thought that toting this gun was a symbol of some sort of success.
Leyenda del Charro Negro. A lot of people have a lot of different stories of what they've heard and stuff. Basically, el Charro Negro is like if you're walking outside in the street of Mexico and stuff, late at night, if you see a horse,
A black horse specifically.
a black horse with a guy riding it, bro, but he's a charro, basically like a Mexican cowboy and dressed in all black, and obviously wants to take your soul.
Yeah.
And shit. Comes up to you, offers you a bunch of gold, riches for your soul. If you agree, he gives you the gold. If you don't, then the fucking just goes away and you're good. That's an urban legend that you hear a lot in like the whole Mexican household and shit. I have heard that multiple family members of mine, specifically my great grandpa, how like he would go out and drink a lot and shit, and he would hear and like see the
El Charro
Negro.
Negro. Did it offer
There's always a box of gold, like a fucking treasure chest. And allegedly, like my great grandpa was mad grosero, so he would always be like, "Vete a la chingada, get the fuck out of here, motherfucker." But he was drunk and shit. But it's good that he didn't accept, bro.
Yeah, because it would have got his soul, yeah.
Curse the whole family or some shit.
Yeah.
Bro. You never know.
Today, authorities found the rotting bodies of Francis and Donald Fox Sr. inside of their family home. They had been shot in the head and killed by their own son right before he turned the gun on himself and took his own life.
To this day, there is no motive for the murder. It appears to have been completely random.
He took a shotgun, shot his dad while he was in bed, shot his mom in the dining room, then went into his bedroom and shot himself. The bodies weren't found for days, and there was just blood everywhere. In 2016, there was a violent incident. There was so much blood that they had to move the individual into the dining room. And we started ripping up flooring, and we uncovered this stain.
Why did he murder his parents?
Hopefully you guys can figure that out, because no one really knows why.
The woman who died here most recently, that case is still open.
That case is still open.
All right, Junior, I'm coming in, bringing some friends.
This is the sword that was used on the attack. Blood was splattered throughout the house. Shot himself.
I'm very lonely here.
This whole thing is actually blood. Yep, this is the murder weapon.
This is one of the worst ways somebody has ever died. In October 2012, an awful and disturbing thing happened. A 62-year-old employee at Bumblebee Foods named Jose Molina was having a normal day in the Bumblebee facility in California. In his schedule, Jose was tasked with the performance maintenance on an 11-meter-long industrial oven, so he went inside one of the tanks to begin his work. Believing that Jose was in the bathroom, one of his coworkers actually shut the tank's door, trapping Jose inside, and then filled the oven with 5,400 kilograms of tuna and then turned the oven on. A search then ensued when the manager realized Jose was missing, but by then it was way too late. They found Jose's body 2 hours later inside the oven, completely burnt and melted away, 100% unrecognizable. The temperature inside the oven reached 270 degrees Fahrenheit, and Jose was unfortunately cooked alive inside of the tank with all the fish. And you could only imagine how horrific this death actually was. Could you imagine being cooked alive and then being crushed by tens to thousands of pounds of fish, mixed with the smell, the texture, the heat? This death was just awful. The company Bumblebee and 2 managers were actually charged for this death, and the company got off with a $6 million settlement. But do you think $6 million is way too low for a death like this? Many people believe it should have been more close to $50 million. Nonetheless, this is by far one of the worst and most uncomfortable deaths of all time, and I can't imagine Jose's thoughts as he was being cooked alive with hundreds of fish.
Guys, I hope you're all having an amazing time. Well, we couldn't go anywhere because of the current situation, but we are having an epic time. Offshore fired up the grill, and the kids are just playing.
The man you just saw in that video is a pedophile, and he abused his own adopted children. So this guy is from Houston, Texas, and online he went by the name Haim Nassim Cohen. So he claimed on social media that he was a Hasidic Jew born in Brooklyn, New York. But in reality, his real name was Jeffrey Lujan Vihil, and he was born here in Texas. But we're going to call him Haim for the rest of this TikTok. So Haim was big on social media. His TikTok had a big following because he adopted 9 sons. And people all across the internet praised Haim for his thoughtless actions and how he was helping change these boys' lives. In the videos, he was always surrounded by his sons. They were playing games, doing challenges. But then in February of 2023, one of Haim's sons went to a podcast anonymously and reported that he was being abused by his own father. And that's when disturbing facts started to come to light, like the fact that Haim was already out from a 2019 case that he was fighting involving child abuse as well. Eventually, 6 in total of the children came forward and said that they were SA'd and abused by their own father, who, like I said before, is a stone-cold pedophile. One of the young victims even claimed that his adopted father would pepper spray him in the face until he submitted to the abuse. Prosecutors also said that this dirty dad kept his children locked up in their bedrooms until 4 p.m. almost every day, and he would only let them out if they were going to perform acts for him. Haim's son, who went on the podcast, also claimed that everything that he did was fake. He said that he only sat in a wheelchair when other people came around, he only brought out oxygen tanks when other people were around, and that he was the most manipulative, biggest liar he's ever known. Thankfully, this guy is behind bars now. What a horrific story, but if you were to just look at the family's social media, you would have no idea that this was happening behind the scenes. Only God knows how frequently this is happening right now in America.
La leyenda de la lechuza.
Okay.
You see how they say that witches are lechuzas, owls, or whatever?
Yeah.
And it's kind of also a symbol of bad luck if you see an owl, especially in the daytime or whatever. And this was in a small town in Mexico, that there was this lady who they would call her La Lechuza, but she was a witch. She would perform a lot of like rituals and shit until eventually they caught her, so they decided to kill her. Right before they're about to kill her, she sees an owl flying on top of her, and she basically curses them and says that she will come back in the form of an owl and kill everybody and get revenge. So the legend is that in the middle of the night she would come. If you see an owl, that it's La Lechuza, and basically what she does is that she shapeshifts from an owl into a regular lady, a witch, and she kills you in the middle of the night.
I didn't know that it was bad luck if you see it in daytime.
I mean, there's different beliefs. A lot of people have different ways of seeing it, like everything else. There's some people who say that it's a sign of good luck. If you see it, that means that there's big changes coming in your life. It also means like wisdom and knowledge and stuff like that. But from what I've heard is that it's basically like death is around, like death is near.
You ever experienced seeing like an owl?
I seen an owl when I was younger. It had
What? Oh my god. Holy shit. Frightening. It just said frightening on the thing, and he's actually thrown up. I think we need to stop and get the fuck out. Okay, this, yeah. We need to stop. Let's get the fuck out of here. Are you okay? No, man. Alright, let's stop.
Yeah, let's stop.
Whatever spirits are out here, you can't follow us.
Yeah, no one's following us.
Not allowed
Leave us
to.
alone. We were trying to talk to someone that wasn't you.
I'm shutting all this off. I'm fucking scared. I'm shutting all this off. I'm just shutting everything off. Like, I don't wanna... You're not allowed to communicate with us from this point forward. Stay away from us. Stay away from calls. Drain. It just said drain and terrified.
The mother of the Uvalde school shooter was arrested last year after making death threats herself. And this seems to be an alarming pattern of behavior in this family. So if you don't remember, in 2022, this man went into the Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, and opened fire, killing 21 people altogether, 19 young children and 2 teachers. This was one of the most horrific events to ever really happen here in the United States. It sent shockwaves around the world. And those 21 students and teachers that lost their lives that day will never be forgotten. But in January of 2023, Salvador Ramos, the shooter's mother, Adriana Reyes, spent 2 nights in jail for threatening to murder her disabled partner that she lived with. Apparently, the man that she was dating stated that he felt terrified and felt like she could kill him at any second, and that's why he called the police to report her. Now, initially she tried to claim that this never happened, but somebody who was a witness to these threats, who actually heard her screaming these death threats, corroborated the story with the police, and she was arrested. And if you'll remember, Salvador Ramos's cousin actually threatened to do the same thing as his cousin, aka he threatened to commit another shooting last year as well. And needless to say, I think that there's just something wrong here. This week on our podcast, my wife Courtney and I are starting our series about the Uvalde school shooting. Our podcast is called Murder in America, and we're going through everything that led up to this, the police failures, the massacre itself, and obviously everything that happened afterwards.
A hooded man was spotted near this woman's house in York, and then she vanished. It was March 2009. 35-year-old Claudia Lawrence was working at the University of York as a chef. She lived in Heworth and was a beautiful and well-liked woman. The day before she vanished, she spoke to her mum, Joan, on the phone. They had a perfectly normal conversation about stuff that had been on TV that day, and they arranged to see each other the following week. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The following day, though, on the 19th of March, Claudia disappeared. Now, it was incredibly strange for her to just vanish without contacting her friends or family. It was also very strange that she didn't show up at work that day. Her dad called police, who immediately started looking into where she could have gone. They scoured CCTV of the local area and they found a particularly harrowing clip. It was a hooded figure entering and then leaving an alleyway near to Claudia's home. Now, this was around 7:15 p.m. the night that she seemingly disappeared. Frustratingly, it wasn't possible for police to identify the figure from the image. Officers then started looking into the possibility that Claudia might have had some enemies that wanted to do her harm. Interestingly, it was revealed that Claudia had been seeing a married man. Could this have indicated a motive for somebody to want to hurt her? Over the years, teams of divers, search dogs, and forensic experts have scoured the area to try and find any sign of her. Police believe that she was murdered, but no body has ever been found. Tragically, in 2021, her dad passed away without ever knowing what happened to his daughter. Now, someone must know something about Claudia's disappearance. She would be 50 this year if she were alive today.
Real life Jeepers Creepers.
Like the movie?
Yes, the movie. 2001 movie was based on a real life story. Specifically, the beginning of the movie.
Like when he's driving down with his pickup truck or something.
So the movie's writer and director Victor Salva, he took inspiration from an incident that happened in 1990 in Michigan. Everything starts off with brother and sister Ray and Mary Thornton. They were just out on a regular Sunday on a drive. They were just vibing and they were playing a game where they would read license plates of passing cars and they would have to name a phrase starting with either the beginning letter of the license plate, or if it says something, they make a word out of the license plate. And then a van ends up speeding past them. Like, they just brushed it off. They didn't think anything of it until a couple minutes after they end up seeing this old schoolhouse, and that same van that sped past them is parked there now. But this time they see the man was carrying a white bedsheet that was covered in blood, not realizing that at the time they had come in contact with a man named Dennis Depew, who had killed his wife and was trying to dispose of the body near that schoolhouse. And the way they found him was crazy as well. The only reason why they found him was because of an episode of a show called Unsolved Mysteries. I don't know if you ever heard about that show.
I heard about that show.
It's a very, very popular show that people watched back in the day, and even till this day. Basically,
a child carried out a copycat 9/11 attack, and I feel like no one knows about it. It was the 5th of January 2002. In the aftermath of the horrific 9/11 attacks on America, people were on high alert for a copycat attack. High school student Charles J. Bishop was in fact one of those who wanted to recreate the horrific events of that day. He attended East Lake High School in Tarpon Springs, Florida. Now, the 15-year-old had been taking flying lessons. On the day in question, he was unfortunately left alone in a light aircraft. Taking his chance, Charles started the engine without permission and flew off in the plane. Terrifyingly, he flew towards the Bank of America Tower in downtown Tampa. Air traffic control were immediately notified, and they dispatched a helicopter to try and warn him to land the plane. Despite this, though, he was determined to carry out a horrific tragedy. He flew the plane straight into the building. The plane hit the 29th floor of the 42-story building. This killed Charles instantly. Now, thankfully, nobody else was killed in this incident and the building remained structurally intact, apart from obviously some damage to one of the offices. Charles had left a self-unaliving note stating his support for certain groups and organisations, which I won't name on this app. I feel like you can probably guess who I'm referring to. We know very little about what caused Charles to want to do something so horrific. Bizarrely though, Charles's mum tried to sue the company that make Accutane. It's believed that the teenager was taking this for his acne. His mum blamed them for causing side effects such as depression, which she felt contributed to his actions that day.
However, coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
This is a terrible situation that should have never have happened. Ricardo Flores was a 21-year-old man from a small village in Mexico. Ricardo was a student of law and his parents worked in the United States to help him with his funds. Because of this, Ricardo lived with his grandmother. Ricardo's goal in life was to become a lawyer and earn enough money so his parents could return from the United States. On August 29th, 2018, Ricardo's uncle Alberto asked if he would like to come with him to a nearby village to pick up some building materials. Ricardo said yes and got into Alberto's SUV and they drove off to the village. But in a horrifying coincidence, messages have been going around on the app called WhatsApp about two men in a SUV that were out looking to kidnap children. And of course, these rumors created a lot of fear in this village. And as we know, fear can make people do the absolute worst thing. Ricardo and Alberto parked not too far away from a school and drank a few beers, totally unaware of these rumors going around. The WhatsApp message said, "Please, everyone be aware because a plague of child kidnappers have entered the country. It appears these criminals are involved in organ trafficking. In the past couple of days, a number of children have disappeared. Parents, please pay attention." So when two strangers entered the village in a SUV parked not too far from a school, villagers had firmly believed they found who was responsible. Villagers gathered around and approached Ricardo and Alberto in the car and accused them of being kidnappers and dragged them from their car and began to beat them. The police were alerted and arrived at the scene to see what was happening. Ricardo and Alberto were then taken to a police station 20 minutes away from the village. They were brought in for disturbing the peace due to the large crowd that had gathered around them, and they were kept there to be protected until the police knew what was going on. But the angry crowd had gathered around the police station, and in that crowd was a man named Francisco Martinez, who started a Facebook live stream on his phone. During this live stream, Francisco told his followers to come give their support and said, "Believe me, the kidnappers are here." Some villagers then climbed the town hall building and rang the bell to attract more villagers. They did this to spread the news that the kidnappers were caught. It was then found out that the police were going to release Ricardo and Alberto, which only angered the crowd more. One person in the crowd then got a loudspeaker and told people to use their money to get petrol from a gas station and take justice into their own hands. At this time, more than 100 people were gathered right outside the police station, shouting for the men to be killed on the spot. The police then made a statement saying the two men weren't kidnappers and that they had been misled. But in the village, the trust with the police wasn't the best, so they obviously didn't believe them. The crowd then bursted into the police station and dragged Ricardo and Alberto out of their cells and began to beat them very badly. Ricardo's cousin Joanna was alerted of the situation and went to the scene as fast as possible. She was crying and trying her best to convince the mob that they were innocent and that there has been a huge misunderstanding. The mob didn't believe her and they then started chanting, "Burn them." Ricardo's mother, who was in the United States, began to get flooded by messages on Facebook. These messages said that her son was arrested and suspected of being a kidnapper. She refused to believe this and clicked on one of the links she was sent. The link then brought her to one of the live streams of one of the people in the crowd filming the beating. All she could do was watch as she saw her son and brother-in-law being beaten by multiple people. She commented on the live stream, begging the mob to leave them alone, but of course this had no effect. Alberto's wife was also sent a link and she had to watch her husband be brutally beaten. The mob then started pouring petrol on the two men. Those who were in the crowd will later say that by the time petrol was poured onto them, Ricardo had already died from the beating, although Alberto was very much alive as they set both of them on fire. One person who witnessed the horrific situation said every time the fire went out, the mob would quickly start pouring more petrol. Smoke from the fire could be seen from any part of the village. The crowd cheered, believing they just saved the world from two evil people, but that's not the truth at all. The truth is, Ricardo and Alberto were totally innocent. For 2 hours, the crowd stayed at the scene, standing around the two charred men and taking photos. Ricardo's grandmother was then called to the scene and was asked to identify their bodies, which is just horrific. Not long after the two men died, it was confirmed they did nothing wrong. Those who were directly responsible fled the village to avoid being arrested. What is especially tragic is that Alberto had 3 daughters who were now fatherless. On August 30th, a day after the brutal murder, a funeral was held for Ricardo and Alberto, and it's believed that a number of people who were in the crowd during the murder were present. It also turns out that the messages that were circulating on WhatsApp were absolutely fake. It was fake news, and nobody checked to see if the news was legit. This case is just so sad and honestly very brutal. Mob justices like this are common, but this one really stands out to me. Isn't it also crazy that nobody wanted to hear and listen when they were killing criminals, but when they were the criminals, they fled? There's many pictures and videos online showing this tragedy, but as always, I recommend not to watch them or look at them because it is truly awful. It's sad seeing 2 innocent men being killed and burnt in this way, especially with the whole crowd recording and cheering, watching the situation with delight. May Ricardo and Alberto rest in peace.
Sometimes truth is stranger than fiction. The case of Richard Trenton Chase is a story which even the most depraved horror writer would struggle to create. Over the course of 4 weeks spanning across 1977 and 1978, Richard Chase took the lives of 6 innocent victims in Sacramento, California. His murders gradually progressed in violence, beginning with drive-by shootings and culminating in acts of cannibalism.
This one is called the Oakland County Child Killer, and it's still an unsolved mystery. The killer has never been caught. Nobody knows who the killer is. There was a killing spree for kids, ages from 10, 11, and 12. The thing about this, right? They were all found in public areas. They were either shot or strangled to death. And before they died, like autopsy and stuff like that showed that they were like nurtured and cared for before they died. Like they were bathed before they were killed. And like investigators are saying how like could be like some sick parent instinct. Like once that happened, they started creating a bunch of composite sketches, what the guys could have looked like. Okay. I do have 2 suspects that could be linked to this.
How did they get the suspects though?
Okay, so one of them, Archibald Edward Sloan. The reason why he was a suspect or whatever, because he was a known child molester, and they had investigated him, and in his car they found like hairs that belonged to 2 of the boys. And there was other hair in the vehicle too that didn't belong to him. So they basically said like, nah, it can't be him. So
how does that make sense though?
He could have been like an accomplice. But then there's another one named Chris Bush. Before one of the kids went missing, he was arrested and investigated for CP charges. And then I think a couple years after, he ends up allegedly, but the way the crime scene looked,
it looked like a fake
When they went in his house to investigate, there was no blood in the scene. His body was fully wrapped around, even his head. And then I have a picture that they took of his room, and there was something in the picture that kind of linked everything together. Right here on the left side, it's a hand drawing, and it's this picture. And they're saying that it could be this kid.
Oh shit! He's like screaming type shit, right?
And police reports that picture was never reported or anything. Like nobody knew about it.
They probably didn't even think about it.
Or do you think like they were low key in on it?
When a woman vanished from her apartment, Google Maps would reveal a horrific murder. Maribel Ramos was 36 years old when she vanished. She'd been a tomboy growing up, and she joined the US Army after high school. She was honorably discharged in 2008. When she moved back to America, she decided to move in with her mum in Orange County. She attended California State University to, ironically, study criminal justice. Sadly, her mum passed away in 2009, so she was left living alone. She wanted a roommate to cheer the place up and help her pay her bills. Unfortunately, this decision would end up being fatal. Maribel decided to advertise on Craigslist, which is kind of an American version of like eBay. Now, Casey Joy messaged Maribel and said that he was looking for someone to move in with. He said he was easygoing and he needed a place locally for his work. Maribel and her sister met up with Casey to just suss him out and see what he was like. They both felt he was a very nice guy. They even felt a bit sorry for him, which was exacerbated when he moved in. They noticed he rarely left the apartment, so Maribel kind of took him under her wing and started doing like food shops and going on walks with him. She wanted to keep him company in the absence of him having any friends. However, Casey soon got the wrong end of the stick. He admitted to Maribel's sister that he was in love with Maribel. Now, her sister was alarmed and said, "I'm sorry, you've got it wrong, she's not really interested like that." When Maribel heard about this of her sister, she also tried to nip things in the bud with Casey. However, although at first he seemed to take the rejection quite well, things would take a very dark turn. He started to do things very out of character, including spending a hell of a lot of money on plastic surgery to make him look different. He was clearly obsessed with her and wanted to do anything to increase his chances. On the 3rd of May 2013, Maribel was due to attend a softball game but never showed up. Her loved ones tried and failed to get in contact with her, and when they turned up to her apartment, she wasn't there. Police were informed and they scoured CCTV of the local area. They spotted her on video at 7:15 the night before she vanished. Now, Casey was interestingly the last person to see her. He told police that that night they'd had an argument, he left, went for a drive. When he came back to the apartment, she'd gone. Police then started looking into the records that they had for Casey. He was found to have a violent past, with his own sister even filing a restraining order against him. Interestingly, they also found a documented phone call from Maribel 12 days before her disappearance. This was a call to 911 in which she stated in a panic, "I'm just calling to let you guys know that if something happens that I did it because I was trying to defend myself." She told them on the call she was fearful of her roommate. They then worryingly discovered that Maribel had been trying to evict Casey from the property. He'd stopped paying towards the bills and it was just getting really awkward between the pair. Now, Maribel had been chatting to a man on a dating site called Paul Lopez. Paul actually offered to help Maribel out and helped to encourage Casey to leave the property. He said he would speak to him, which he did. However, his attempt was in vain. Now, Maribel was still missing. Casey, meanwhile, was trying to look like a grieving friend, but he was strangely not helping in the search for her. He also wasn't attending any of the candlelit vigils that they were holding in the local area to pay respects to her. Police started keeping an eye on him and seeing what he was up to. They noticed him attending a lot of internet cafes. They decided to have a look at the public computer that he was using. What they found was key to cracking the case. He was searching extremely suspicious things like how long does it take a body to decay. Now, by this point, they were following his every move and they were even tracking the computer that he was on and watched him go on Google Maps and search for a very specific tree. He zoomed into the location and then logged out. They knew they had to go to this tree. When they got to the location, they found Maribel's body. Casey had buried her in a shallow grave. Unfortunately, she had decomposed so much that they couldn't really determine her cause of death. They did, however, arrest Casey. He was found guilty of murder and given 15 years to life in prison.
These are videos humans were never meant to see. Okay, so we all remember this viral video of a girl on a plane completely freaking out, saying she wants to get off because the person she just saw wasn't human. But what if I told you some guy just did the same exact thing a couple days ago? Just watch this video and let's talk about it. So yeah, that guy claims that he saw a shapeshifter on the plane, and he instantly got up freaking out and tried to open the plane door while they're in the air. This video is absolutely insane, and what's going on recently with all these videos of people on planes seeing shapeshifters and things that aren't human?
This horrific shooting took the lives of 3 people, including 2 children. A tragic shooting took place at the end of May this year that stunned Pennsylvania. 2 young boys were innocently playing in their garden with kittens when they were killed by gunfire. The 2 young victims were brothers called Jesus and Sebastian Perez Salome. They were only 8 and 9 years old, and their mum was working at a shop nearby when this occurred. She actually heard the gunshots while she was at work, and she was completely unaware that her boys were anything to do with this. When she found out, she was in complete shock. A 19-year-old called Joshua was also killed in the incident, and he was apparently the target due to an alleged argument. A 33-year-old neighbour was also hit by a stray bullet and had to undergo surgery. Police arrested Ivan Rosero in North Philadelphia. Alex Santos and a 16-year-old male were also arrested. It's believed that the district attorney is seeking the death penalty for the shooters.
Everybody needs to watch this video. Okay, so we all remember this dress that broke the internet. Some people think it's white and gold, others think it's blue and black. But the man behind this dress actually has been charged with the attempted murder of his wife. 38-year-old Keir Johnston allegedly committed an 11-year-old campaign of domestic violence actions and control against his wife, all leading up to a moment last March in which he allegedly attempted to kill her by pinning her to the ground and compressing her neck. Keir Johnston has denied all allegations against him at this time, and the attempted murder case will have its preliminary hearing before a trial in 2024. This is actually crazy because this is one of the first things that ever go viral on the internet, and the person behind it was literally just charged with the attempted murder of his wife. So do you think Keir Johnston tried to kill his wife? Or do you think he's innocent? Let me know your opinions on this whole case in the comments, because this is absolutely mind-blowing to me, and I bet it is to a lot of you guys also. And one last time, is the dress white and gold or blue and black? These are videos you need to see before you die. Okay, so did you know when a whale dies, it sometimes falls to the bottom of the ocean floor called a whale fall, and their corpse creates a complex ecosystem for countless deep-sea organisms? Well, the video I'm about to show you is exactly that, which a research submarine discovered, and it shows many organisms enjoying this whale's homemade ecosystem. Here's the video, and it's crazy.
Whale fall. Whale fall. Here we go, baby. Okay,
Yeah, dinner is served.
Oh,
that's not bacterial, Matt.
No, they are worms. Look at the blubber on the right side. Yeah.
It's not even digested all the way. This is so cool.
Definitely, where food is so limited, I would imagine scavenging is a great strategy. Your food doesn't run away.
So yeah, isn't that video so fascinating? It's crazy to me how life can just end for one, but even after death, they can still help. These are photos that go unseen by most people, part 1. Up first is what a gasoline container looks like underneath a gas station. And let me guess, some of you thought the gas was just unlimited at gas stations. Well, it's not, and it's actually stored in these giant containers underneath the gas station. Next up, if you're a boy, you definitely shaved. But did you know this is what the inner workings of shaving cream looks like? This is actually crazy, and if you didn't, now you do. Next up is what the inside of a bungee cord looks like. I've never been on a bungee cord, and I don't think I ever will, but just looking at this photo is kind of unsettling for some reason. I think it's because there's so much little cords all next to each other. Next up is what a movie theater looks like with no seats or screen in it. This is so unsettling, and it looks like the opening scene of a horror movie. Next up, did you ever wonder what the inside of a bowling pin looks like? Well, if so, it's actually just wood. This completely blew my mind when I looked this up. Because I never knew what was in bowling pins, but I would have never guessed it was wood. So who else's mind is blown?
Police officer crushed my head and killed me while I was shouting that I couldn't breathe. My name is George Floyd. I am a 46-year-old African-American man. It all started when I entered a convenience store. I was accused of using a counterfeit bill for a purchase, which led to a call to the police. When the officers arrived, I was arrested and handcuffed. That's when my life took a turn. They pinned me to the ground, face down. I tried to cooperate as best as I could, but my life was in their hands. Derek Chauvin, one of the officers, came and knelt on me, pressing his knee against my neck. I found myself trapped, unable to move, to breathe. I cried that I couldn't breathe repeatedly for 10 minutes, which felt like an eternity to me. I felt life gradually leaving me. My vision darkened, and I lost consciousness. The last thing I felt was fear and pain, but also a profound sense of injustice. People took to the streets to demand justice for me and to denounce police brutality and the systemic racism that has existed for far too long.
Kidnapped and killed many children to eat them. My name is Albert Fish, and I'm an American man who committed atrocious crimes from the 1920s to 1936. One of my most infamous crimes was that of little Grace Budd. I pretended to be a man named Frank Howard and convinced her family to let me take Grace with me to a supposed job. They trusted me. They suspected nothing. I took her to a secluded little cabin I'd prepared for the occasion. Once